it feels like we already have this with the backbone.
Right.
But I think in some ways, maybe Sony looks at this and maybe sees the success or the interest of a device like a backbone and sees something that they can capitalize on, which I think is kind of smart, because for me, one of the things about the backbone, which I don't have one, by the way, so maybe my experience is just hypothetical, is that it would annoy me if I was playing a game and someone was trying to text me, or I got a notification or whatever. There's so many distractions. I almost wouldn't want to play games like that on my phone. So to have a device dedicated to streaming is interesting. And we've seen, I know that Logitech has a streaming device out for Xbox and maybe PC as well. I'm not sure. I know Maddie has done some content on that. So clearly there is some interest in this type of device. And honestly, I think this is one of the only ways a new PlayStation handheld can exist. I know a lot of people want a proper Vita 2, a new PSP, whatever you want to say. But I think that the era of games that are developed for a dedicated handheld exclusively are over. And that was part of the problem with the Vita. Not the only reason, but one of the main reasons it didn't succeed is that developers had to pour a similar amount of dev time and budget into a portable game when they could just develop a PS3 game instead. And so, which had a much larger install base, charge more for the game you were developing. So it made sense that those big AAA games fizzled out on the Vita. Do you feel like the streaming quality on PS5 is good enough to support a device like this that you may potentially be spending? I mean, if we're talking about pricing, a 7-inch screen, which I mean, who knows what the quality is? That's the same size as a Switch OLED, just in terms of device size. I mean, you'd have to imagine this would be at $200.
Yeah, I mean, I'm and sorry to interrupt. I was emailing with Tom from Moore's Law is Dead, who is our tech analyst that we have on from time to time to go into tech, and he was saying that he could see this thing costing $100 if the entire idea is for just to get a true remote play device in, that it would he says, I would argue this thing will sell terribly unless it's $100 or less. But in all honesty, the screen looks cheap and it lacks hardware. It might actually make it $50 to produce.
Isn't the backbone $100? I know that's not a Sony product, but the backbone is almost $100 alone.
Is it really? I thought it was 50 for some reason, but you're probably right.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
Yeah. So I
think Tom. Yeah. So what Tom's basically saying is like they would have to make something so artificially cheap to make it interesting, and that I agree with you that it seems to be a distraction from high fidelity gaming, which is what PS5 is.
This does not appeal to me at all, because I am somebody who I like to play handheld stuff. I weirdly enough, I don't use the Switch at all, but that's more about them just not having the games that I want to play. I remember specifically playing Metal Gear Solid 2 on Vita, like religiously. Like I loved that experience, and it's great. But I'm sacrificing certain things for that. I'm sacrificing my big TV. I'm sacrificing like amazing like surround sound audio so that I can play this comfortably in my bed. I don't want to then sacrifice latency and, dynamic resolution and stuttering based on Wi-Fi. In addition to that, I'm already making sacrifices to play this in my bed as is. And so for me, the idea of a streaming device, it works for the backbone because or even just streaming to your phone because that's your phone. You already have that. It's not something that you have to go out and, it's not something that you have to go out and procure for yourself. The backbone is a controller apparatus that helps you do it easier, but you can do it without it. You don't need the backbone to engage in that kind of streaming ecosystem. So to me, if you're going to make a dedicated gaming apparatus, it needs to at least be able to do some things natively.
I don't think that there's a market for anything like this within Sony's ecosystem. The important thing we have to remember about Vita, and I was there. I mean, I fucking loved and evangelized for the Vita for a long time, and you all damn well know it. Like, I know that thing inside and out. I was all about it. Is that a lot of you guys weren't all about it, and that was the time to speak. And I'm not saying like told you so or something. It's just that's what the market said. And you didn't want Vita. So this clamoring for another dedicated handheld, I think, is kind of weird at this point. I loved Vita and I liked PSP a lot too, but I don't go to PlayStation for that anymore. And a lot of people don't. And a lot of people didn't even at that time. And a lot of people didn't want to even at that time. So that's not what they're talking about here, but I wanted to bring that up because I just think that's kind of like a fantasy. And I'll say right now, and I think I've said it on the show in the past, I know people that were messing around with like R&D third handhelds at PlayStation years ago. They literally like taping screens to controllers, trying to figure out the feel and the look and mocking things up, and they were messing around with that stuff. It just didn't come to fruition. And so I think that we have to understand that not only is that a dead end, a distraction for first and second party resources, a vector into the PlayStation network, which is dangerous for them. And one of the things they were really afraid of with the Vita when it got broken open in 2016, and why, as I've said before and reported before, that they were so eager to shut it down just out of nowhere is because, and getting mad that it was even being brought up and just wouldn't die, is because they wanted it to die. So the idea that they're going to just go back down that road again, I think would be kind of weird. They obviously believe in VR and they believe in having powerful, maybe pro style consoles and iterations like that. And so I can see a device like this existing in a suite of new hardware options that they're going to present as something that just, as long as they have expectations that this thing is going to sell, I don't know, a few 100,000 units maybe in its first year or something like that, or whatever, people are curious about it. I think that that's totally appropriate because according to Insider Gaming, they have a new headset coming out and new earbuds, both for PlayStation. There's going to be a new PS5 discless iteration. We already have one, but one that's specifically made for an external drive. We're going to get so that's basically the PlayStation 5 Slim. Then you're going to get the PlayStation 5 Pro. So they have all of these things going to be peppered out. I would imagine that this is real and obviously a choice that they're going to make, and maybe a direction that they think PlayStation is going to go. And maybe it's more has to do with streaming than just remote play. But for the time being, there, it seems pretty clear that it's made for local use, which is fine. But I don't see the point of it either. I mean, I agree with you, Dustin, that the Backbone, I think the Backbone's awesome. And I've used the Backbone extensively. And it works fine. You're right. It's distracting. You have to you want to be on your phone and you can't really be on your phone. And so first of all, I'd buy this thing. I'm going to buy it and check it out for sure. And maybe I'll end up falling in love with it. But I also think that I fit the very specific criteria, and maybe you do a little bit, Dustin, too, of the person who this would work for the most, which is a person who plays more old school or turn-based games where you're not really, it doesn't really matter if it's 2 frames behind. It doesn't really matter if it doesn't read your X prompt on a menu instantaneously. Yeah. And I play a lot of that kind of stuff, which is why I really liked the Backbone during football season, especially as I was playing Slay the Spire or Trails of Steel, where it just didn't really matter. But I would never play Call of Duty or something on it. Or when I played Evil West, I would never play a real-time I don't want to say real time because that means something like but an action game,
like an action game.
Yeah, right. I would never.
That's kind of the problem. Where for me, I'm like that's like the main stuff that I play. And so for me, like the ultimate fantasy is like being able to be like, just chill in my bed and play Destiny on like a handheld. That'd be like so nice to just like almost fall asleep to it, and then it just like logs me out, and then naturally it's just like, all right, that's cool. I've ended my day doing my kind of almost Second Life video game, and I can do it in bed. That's great. But it's just not suited for that.